Hello, everybody. Happy May the 4th be with you day, aka Star Wars Day, and first day of summer 1 term. Oh my goodness. Y'all made it through spring 2020 semester. Bravo. I hope that you feel really good about it. And if you joined me for last week's class, I hope that you were able to get a good night's sleep at least once in the past week, since we did yoga for sleep when you've got a lot of anxiety last week. So thanks for being here. My name is Shelby. I am one of the counselors over at University Health and Counseling Services. I'm testing out a different camera angle today, so hopefully this works out a little better, or we'll see. So for today, you'll need, you might not need them, but you might want to grab a couple textbooks or yoga blocks if you have them, a blanket, and a pillow or a bolster. I'm a yoga teacher, so I have all of these things, but a pillow, textbooks, and a blanket from your bed, like that all works perfectly. So as I usually say every class, this is the Yoga for Mental Wellness group / class. And today we're going to focus on the hips to counteract all of the sitting you may or may not be doing. And also just kind of do some stretches to open up the body and address any areas that might be tight. This is a yin yoga practice, so it's definitely a lot more, technically it's a more gentle, slower practice, but still has moments where you're really building strength and might feel like, oof, this is a little intense at times. The practice is designed not to be comfortable, but to bring us to an edge in a pose where we feel a sensation, maybe a 4 or 5 out of 10 on a scale of discomfort, where 10 is like excruciating, I can't be in anymore. 4 or 5 is like, well, I'm feeling something. This isn't really that comfortable, but I can hold here for a few minutes. And the idea is that in this practice, we're targeting the connective tissues in the body rather than the muscles. And it's a really beautiful complementary practice to weight training, or if you're doing like high-end, whatever it's called, HIIT training at home or things like that. It's a nice way to have the body be supported by strengthening those connective tissues in the body so that they can support the muscles. It's also a really great practice to learn how to tolerate discomfort in the body, recognizing that it's temporary. And that can translate really well to off the mat, where we realize that challenging times, for example, a pandemic, is temporary. Even though at times we might feel like the world is ending and it's really scary, everything is temporary. So I think it's a really nice complementary practice, and also a way to learn how to tolerate discomfort in the body that can translate to tolerating discomfort in life off the mat. Please do whatever you need to. Obviously, I can't see you, but every pose is an offering. If you need to just lay on your mat the whole time, that's totally okay. Do what works for you. You know your body best. You are the expert of your body. If I might throw out an area in your body where you might be feeling some sensation and you don't feel anything in that area, that's okay. Just kind of play around and see what feels useful to you in each shape. And the more that you practice yin yoga, the more that you really become more in tune with your body. I never say this, but there is a chat function. And for folks that are live with us right now, feel free to drop questions in there if you have them, and I can answer them as we go along. If you're confused about a pose, whatever you need, I'm here for you. All right, let's get started. So you might bring your blanket to about halfway down your mat or so. I have lots of fuzzies on my mat right now because it's a sticky mat. And we'll be taking child's pose first. You'll want to have wide knees for this. So potentially bringing your knees about the width of your mat. And then you'll sink your hips back toward your heels. I don't know if you can see this, but my ankles, let's kind of, hi everybody, we're fixing the camera. Thank you for bearing with me. So you'll see my ankles and the tops of my feet are not on the mat. This is a nice way to support the knees and not put too much pressure on the ankles and tops of the feet. So toes will be together behind you, knees about the width of your mat, and then you'll slump yourself forward, reaching the arms forward long along your mat. You might rest your head directly onto your mat, or my personal favorite, bringing a block on the lowest height underneath your forehead. And this is actually, using the block under your forehead is nice initially just to support the back of the neck. And especially if you find like your hips are really far away from your heels, it's a nice way to support the neck. And if you do find that your hips are far away from your heels, you can bring that pillow or blanket underneath your hips and then still sit the hips back toward your heels, but then rest your torso, allow your heart to melt toward the ground. And just take a few deep breaths here, really filling up the lungs. And there might be times, such as now, where I'm not going to be in the same shape as you. I might sit up just to talk, but I'll encourage you to stay in that shape until I cue you to ease out of it. And so here in this child's pose, just maybe take a moment to take stock of your body. Notice if there are any areas of tension or any areas that might be gripping or clenching. Sometimes the body will become maybe more stiff or clench up when it's, this might sound weird, but when it's experiencing some sort of fear, right? Like, ooh, if this muscle releases, what's going to happen? In this shape, can you trust that your body is supported by the ground beneath you? And can you allow the muscles in your body to soften so that your bones can continue to hold this shape, but bit by bit your body begins to relax? Sorry, that's my water bottle. I don't know how to fix it, but every time I initially take a sip, it makes a very bizarre noise. So anyways. Continue to take deep breaths here, maybe seeing if you can direct the breath to your low back. And notice how that allows the ribs to flare out and your low back to almost expand side to side. Simultaneously, you might notice that the ribs flare and almost brush against, or maybe they actually do brush against the tops of your thighs, or maybe along the inner thigh, depending how far forward you're folding. We've been here for a few minutes, so notice if there's any room for your hips to be even heavier as they sink toward your heels. You might even take your hands and just kind of smush your hips down, maybe pressing along the sacrum, this flat part at the bottom of your spine, or even just smushing, there's no pretty way to say this, but your glutes or your bum, kind of pushing it down towards the earth, towards your heels. You could also bring your hands to your thighs and just gently kind of smooth the thighs down towards the ground. Maybe even like the hips, smoothing them down towards the ground as well. Staying exactly as you are and not trying to make anything go further is also perfectly appropriate. Take a couple more deep breaths here, really deepening the breath, allowing it to begin at the low part of your belly. Maybe allowing it to expand through your ribs. Imagine that the breath is swirling in your torso, breathing through all those little spaces in your lungs. Sighing out the mouth can be a nice way to also release tension. You've probably heard me say that before. One more long, deep breath in. Gently exhale. Inhale, use the arms to lift your torso. Bring the knees together and come to sit on your shins for a moment. If that feels too intense, you might come to sit up on your toes and then allow yourself to sit back onto your heels. Gonna fix the computer again. We're learning, and we're breathing. So wherever you are, sitting on your shins fully, tops of your feet against the ground, or perhaps on your toes, wherever you are, bring your hands to rest on the tops of your thighs for a moment. Maybe you have your eyes closed, or perhaps you gaze on the floor in front of you. Ensure that your chin is parallel with the ground, and imagine that the tips of your ears could reach toward the ceiling. Shoulders are over your hips so that you've got this really lovely long straight spine. Can you breathe as deeply as you did when you were in your child's pose? Maybe it's even easier to breathe deeply in this shape. You might bring one hand to your belly and maybe the other hand to the outside of your ribs. And as you feel ready, take a big breath in the lowest part of your belly, allowing that lower hand to lift and expand. Maybe your other hand on your ribs begins to also expand. Exhale, allow the ribs to sink back. Belly button begins to pull towards your spine. Everything settles. Inhale into the low belly. Maybe the ribs. Exhale, allow the ribs to soften. Belly begins to soften. Again, big breath in. Maybe the ribs expand. Exhale. Ribs soften, belly softens, navel to spine. Again, big breath in. And exhale. Deep breath in. And exhale. Release your hands. Come to sit on your side for a moment. Maybe move your blanket out of the way if you were using that for your knees. And then come to sit in a comfortable cross-legged position. You'll leave your left hand alongside your hip, so resting on the floor. Reach your right arm up towards the ceiling. Get a long spine. I like to shimmy through my waist so that I create a little bit more length along my side waist. And then big breath in. Exhale, arch up and over your left side. Maybe press into the left hand. And what you might notice in the body is if it helps, you might imagine that you could really root down the left hip, root down the right hip, but then imagine that your torso is like a tree kind of growing out of these roots in your hips. And your right arm is like a branch reaching over towards the left. Maybe the sun is in the left and that's why you're reaching. I don't know if you can see this, but I have a tendency when I arch up and over, I kind of pull my shoulder up, so that left shoulder. So see if you can lower that left shoulder, still maintain all that length, pressing into the left hand, but reaching up and over with the left. Gaze can be towards the front of your space, maybe looking up towards the ceiling. Breathe deeply here. Really breathe into the right side of your waist, allowing those little spaces in between the ribs to expand gently. One more long breath in. Exhale, gently allow the arms to come back down. Pause for a moment. You might even take your peace fingers and extend your arms long alongside you and press your fingers into the earth. Keeping that long spine, shoulders over your hips, your peace fingers pressing into the earth. I cannot remember what this is called specifically, but it's a mudra. And mudra is typically the sort of like this shape you can take with your hands that symbolizes something. And from a distant memory, I know that this is a nice pose to do for grounding and when maybe you want to feel more connected to the earth. I highly recommend, if you're lucky to have beautiful weather today, finding some space outside, some green area, away from people, wear your mask. If you're in Boston, at least, you need to. And maybe just find some green patch where you can charge your fingers into the ground and really get that energy and nourishment from the earth. All right, so pressing your right hand now into the mat. Reach your left arm long up towards the ceiling. Big breath in. Exhale, arch up and over your right side. Again, rooting through those hips. Reaching towards the left, or excuse me, towards the right with your left arm. Be mindful that your right shoulder is not hiked up by your ears. Really root down in that left hip. And notice how the pressing down of your left hip and the reaching of that left arm allows for a bit more space along the left side of your waist. Gaze can be forward or perhaps looking up towards your left arm. Take some deep breaths here, just as deeply as you did when you were seated upright. Nice, one more big breath in. Exhale, gently release your arm. Pause for a moment, maybe resting your hands on your knees. If you find that you need a little bit more energy, you can have palms face up. More grounding energy would be palms face down. Notice for a moment how your shoulders feel, how your waist feels, your ribs, your side body, your spine. Reach your left arm forward in front of you, making like a stop sign with your hand. And then gently, with your right hand, pull back on your fingers. And so here you might notice a stretch across the underneath your forearm, and maybe even a stretch across the palm. Don't feel like you have to be super aggressive with this. You can gently pull back on the fingers and find that point, where you feel a bit of a stretch, but we don't want to pull too aggressively just because we don't want to harm this very tender part of our body. Flip your hand so that your fingertips face down towards the floor, and then again, gently pull back on the fingers. Notice how that shifts the stretch in your hand. At least it does for me. I get a little bit more in this little tender spot right at the base of my palm, where my palm meets my wrist, as well as a stretch across the outer portion of my wrist, where the pinky edge side. Release your hand, maybe open and close the palm a couple of times, maybe shake out your wrist gently. And then reach that right arm up towards the ceiling. Allow it to bend at the elbow and then rest your hand on your head and gently pull your head down towards your left shoulder. I might have said right arm, I apologize. I'm mirroring you, and so I'm not giving I'm not using my own right and left. But your left ear will reach toward your left shoulder so that you get a stretch across the right side of your neck. You might play with your gaze. Notice that if you turn your nose more towards the floor, how that shifts the stretch across the right side of the neck. Gazing upwards also changes that. And don't feel like, again, you have to pull too aggressively. Just find that 4 or 5 out of 10. Allow your jaw to be soft here. Avoid clenching your teeth. I don't know if you caught that, but allow the left shoulder to soften away, not be hiked up towards the ear. Big breath in. Exhale, use your left hand to push your head back upright. Oof. And then just take a moment to notice the difference between both sides of your neck for a moment. You might notice, you might not. Reach your right hand forward in that stop sign. Pull back gently with your left hand on those fingers. Getting that nice stretch across the underneath of your forearm. I don't know. Words are hard today. Maybe a stretch across the palm. Flip your hands, let your fingertips reach towards the ceiling. Again, pull back on the fingers. Again, notice how that shifted maybe the stretch for you in your wrist, in your forearm, your palm. You might notice that one hand, one wrist is a bit tighter than the other. It might correlate to which one is your more dominant hand. Might not. And then open and close that palm a couple of times. Maybe gently shake the wrist out. Reach your right arm up towards the ceiling. Bend at the elbow and then gently pull your right ear towards your right shoulder, dropping the right shoulder, letting it relax. We didn't do this on the first side, but you might rest your left arm alongside your hip. That might change the stretch that you feel across the left side of your neck. Moving your gaze, moving your nose towards the floor, towards the ceiling will also shift the stretch that you feel across the left side of your neck. And again, finding that 4 or 5 out of 10. Holding in any spaces that feel a little bit sticky. How's your breath? Take one more long breath in. Exhale, gently use your right hand to push your head back upright and then just pause for a moment. Notice the stretch that you might feel across the neck, maybe across the tops of the shoulders. You might even you might bring your hands to frame your neck and just kind of massage your upper back, just gently for a moment. I mean, how often are we really giving ourselves like a self-massage? I don't know. I'm going to say not often. At least I'm not doing it. Thanks, neck. You work so hard. All right, so we'll move into square pose. So for this, you're going to take your left leg and you'll stack it on top of your right so that your ankle comes to just the edge of your knee. And it might not be perfectly symmetrical. You may also have one leg that's kind of lifted. And for that, you can bring one of your books or blocks underneath your knee, or potentially bringing a blanket or your pillow underneath your knee for some extra support. That's more if your your hips are a bit tight. I have pretty open hips and pretty flexible hips, so my knees can be stacked pretty seamlessly. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just anatomically how my body is built. It doesn't mean that I'm like more flexible or anything. If you find that you're like me, where your knees are your shins are both stacked on top of each other, your legs are both stacked on top of each other, if you take your hands and you press into your feet, you push simultaneously with your feet as you're pushing, it can really increase the stretch and the compression that you feel in your hips. For those of you that maybe have tighter hips and are using a support underneath the knee, you might find that staying upright with your legs in this shape gives you enough sensation in the hips, in the hip flexors, and even in the outer thigh on your right leg. You may also decide to fold forward gently over your legs, but again, that is going to increase the compression that you might feel in the hips. So find what works for you. Again, you might fold forward. You might stay completely upright. If your legs are fully stacked on top of each other, maybe pressing into the feet as you push the feet into your hands, which is a little bit of a workout, I'm not going to lie. Wherever you are, ensure that you have the space in your torso to be able to breathe deeply. We won't be here for too much longer. In these moments where we're in a shape that we're holding a pose and we're staying a bit more still, you might notice that your mind more easily kind of wanders. Maybe you find yourself distracted by something in the room, something within your body, something that you're thinking about, or something outside the room or your space. And know that that's perfectly appropriate. Your brain is designed to keep you safe, and its job is to figure out what's happening when it's distracted, right? It just wants to keep us safe. And so in those moments where you do find yourself distracted, can you acknowledge them and then come back to whatever it is that you're doing in that moment? Useful ways to redirect the attention are to notice the textures that either are on your clothing or your mat, the floor. Noticing the temperature of the room that you're in. Maybe coming back to your breath and consciously breathing more deeply into the low belly, the ribs. Take one more long, deep breath here. Exhale, sigh it out. Walk your torso back upright. Oh my goodness. Extend the legs long in front of you for a moment. Maybe swish the legs back and forth. And then just pause for a moment. Maybe like if it feels good, you can kind of massage your legs. Just kind of rubbing the shins. I like to kind of like grip and then go down. It's a nice way to offer a little bit of massage. Maybe also giving some love to your thighs. Kind of massaging the IT band, that outer thigh. And then we'll switch sides. So stacking this time the right leg on top of the left, coming into square pose on the other side. And again, your left ankle will be resting just outside your right knee and potentially vice versa. If you find that your right knee is pretty high and your hips are really tight, you want to support yourself with a block, a textbook, or maybe a blanket. Staying upright is perfectly appropriate here if you feel like there's a lot of compression and sensation in the hips. You could also fold forward, although that will increase the sensation in the hips. For those of you like me that maybe have pretty open hips, again, pushing your hands into your feet, feet into your hands simultaneously. So that way you do begin to feel some more sensation in the hips. Again, we're looking for that 4 or 5 out of 10. We don't want to be in excruciating pain. Pain is not the goal, but the idea is that we're feeling some discomfort. There's a stretch happening, there's some compression, there's a lengthening. Remember to breathe deeply, really breathe into the low belly. The more you breathe with your belly and the less you breathe with your chest, the more relaxed your body might become. You've ever noticed times where you might feel a bit more anxious, your breath might happen more in your chest. It might be a bit more shallow. And so breathing with the belly you might even notice, like if you're really relaxed, you breathe more with your belly. The belly is soft and the breath is even deeper. So bringing in some of that restful, relaxing breath here. Really root your hips into the ground, just as we did earlier when we were doing those side bends. Tipping your pelvis a little bit backward. That might actually change the stretch that you feel or the compression you feel in your hips. Got less than a minute here. Wherever you are, take a long breath in. Exhale, gently walk your torso back upright if you were folded forward. Extend the legs in front of you long for a moment. Ooh, hello, hips. Ooh, maybe swish the legs back and forth. You might even bend your knees and kind of windshield wiper the legs or swish them back and forth. Oh man, if you are a runner, I feel like holy hip flexors in that pose. I shared with y'all last week, I think it was the first time I shared it, but I recently started running and your girl was not a runner before the pandemic, but it's been really nice to complement my yoga practice and also to release some anxiety. All right, when you feel complete, we'll be taking butterfly pose next. And so you might want your pillow with you or your bolster if you've got it. I'd also recommend if you take your blanket and you fold it up into a small rectangle, come to sit on the edge of your blanket. And then you'll bring your legs out in front of you to about a diamond shape. So you can see my knees are bent out to the side. My feet, the soles of my feet are together, and my heels are not close to my hips. This is a pretty aggressive, intense stretch across the inner leg line and the groin. And because we're going to be holding this for a while, we don't want to do that. We don't want to overextend the body and cause anything to, I don't know, snap or break or something. We want to be safe. So again, bringing your legs out into this more wide diamond shape. And then you might bring your pillow or your bolster in between your legs and just kind of snuggle it in against your heels. Maybe wrap your arms around it, rest your chin on it. My bolster is not very flexible, but if you've got a pillow that's really flexible, you can kind of chop it in half and smush it towards your body and round forward a little bit. Alternatively, you could bring your books or your blocks also in between your legs, stacking one on the tallest height and the other one maybe on its lowest or medium height. And then rounding forward, allow your forehead to rest on your blocks. And you might have to play around to figure out what height works best for you. You could also stay upright with a long spine, pressing your hands into the mat alongside your hips. This is a nice way to really bring some length into the spine and stretch each vertebra. If you do round forward, make sure that you support the neck and the head in some way. So instead of just kind of slumping forward, again, support the neck, support your head. Your head is pretty heavy, and the neck does a lot of work during the day when we're hunched forward over a computer. So we definitely want to make sure that we can offer it some support. You might reach toward your feet, and if you are able to actually touch your feet, you might even massage the soles of your feet. I know, I said, how often do we massage ourselves, right? But no, give your feet some love. If maybe your hands can't reach your feet, maybe you kind of massage your legs again. It's a nice way to offer the body some sort of physical comfort if it does feel comfortable and safe for you. If you're rounding forward here, you might feel an expansion of your spine. You might even feel it spreading across the low back and the sacrum, maybe even your glutes spread. You might feel some compression in the hips and maybe a stretch or like a pulling across the inner leg line in the groin. Maybe even a stretch across the outside of your thighs. Remember to relax your jaw, relax your forehead, your face. See if you can relax any muscle in your body that does not need to be working in this shape. If you're rounding forward, again, ensure that you have the space in your midsection, your torso, to breathe deeply. You've been here for a few minutes, so notice if maybe any sensation has dissipated or if anything feels too intense. If anything feels too intense, gently ease yourself upright maybe a little bit more, or maybe even coming to that long spine, hands pressing into the ground alongside your hips. If you find that you're rounded forward and want to increase the stretch across the inner thighs, the outer thighs, you might kind of wiggle your hips back as you lean and almost like pull your heart forward. So it's this opposite action like we've been doing for most of the class, where the hips are really rooting down. The torso is lengthening forward. Notice how that opposite action maybe increases the stretch that you feel across the legs. Big, full, deep breaths here. Maybe sighing out the mouth if it feels like there's a lot of tension in your body. Sometimes, especially when we get into working the hips like we are today, it might be somewhat activating. And see if you can notice what arises internally for you, thoughts, emotions. But see if you can acknowledge them in a way that's neutral without labeling them as good or bad, but merely noticing them. So it might be, ooh, that's pretty tight, or like, oh, that spot feels maybe a bit warm now that I've been sitting here. When muscles work, the body can tend to get a little bit warm in those areas. Again, if you are distracted, it's perfectly appropriate. It's normal. It's just your brain doing its job. One more big full breath here. Exhale, gently walk the torso back upright. Remove your blocks or your bolster off to the side. Use your arms to bring the knees together. Oof, extend the legs long. And then making fists with your hands, tuck your thumbs into your palms, wrap your fingers around your fists, and then with the flat part in between those two knuckles on your fingers, just begin to massage out your legs, gently patting them down. Avoid your knee. Work your way up your thigh. Give some love to that outer thigh. Underneath. We're not beating ourselves up, but we're kind of massaging, using a little bit of force. Make sure you get your calf muscles. Bonus points, bottom of your feet. Go over your knee. In that calf muscle, sides of your leg, maybe around the shin. Getting the outer thigh, top of your thigh, inner thigh, back of your thigh. Outer hip. Bonus points, bottom of your feet. All right, and then just pause for a moment, extend both your legs long, maybe close your eyes, maybe have a soft gaze. And then just notice if you feel any sensation in your body. Maybe you notice a swirling or a pulsating or this residual vibration from when you were just patting down your legs. In traditional Chinese medicine, which yin yoga is rooted in, this sensation that you may be feeling, that swirling or vibration or almost like flow, is known as qi or energy. It's this life force that flows through our bodies. And through the practice of yin yoga, we're able to move energy through points that might be stuck. And so by holding these shapes and working the connective tissues, we help them become more juicy and more supple, and then be healthier so that energy can move more freely through these specific meridian channels through the body, which I won't get into today. So shifting yourself off of your blanket, you'll move your blanket off to the side, and then you'll bend your left knee and you'll bring it alongside of you, but you'll tuck your left shin underneath your thigh. So you're coming into like this half saddle pose. If this feels like it's really intense on your left knee, pad under the knee with a blanket, and you might fold it once or twice, but giving that a little bit of lift takes the pressure off the knee. You may choose to stay upright here. And sorry, I don't think I said this properly. When you bend your left knee, you're going to bend it so that you come to rest the top of your foot on the ground, and your left heel will be on the outside of your left hip. And so staying upright here might be a significant amount of stretch across the top of your thigh, the ankle, the top of your foot. You could also begin to work your way back, maybe staying upright with arms slightly bent, maybe coming down to your forearms. Depending on your flexibility as well as the openness of your hips, you may, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but I'm going to try it. You may come all the way down to your mat so that you're lying on your back. But this does create a pretty significant back bend and an arch in the low spine, which creates compression in the low back. And it also greatly increases the sensation across the top of your left thigh, as well as the stretch across the top of the left foot and the ankle. So wherever you are, I'm going to come up a little bit. You are likely feeling maybe a pulling across the left knee, a stretch across the left thigh and left ankle. And depending on how far back you lean, you might also get a stretch across your hip, your left hip. Allow the muscles in your legs to relax. We won't be here for too long, so don't worry. I know that this one can be a bit intense. Breathe deeply into your belly. Allow your toes to be relaxed. Big, deep breath in. Side up the mouth. Listen carefully as you inhale, use your arms to prop yourself up and then gently lean over to your right side and extend the left leg back long to meet the right. Pause for a moment and just notice the difference between sides if there maybe is one. You might even gently massage out your knee if it felt a little bit tight in that last shape. Then switching sides, you'll bend your right knee now alongside you so that you come to rest the top of your shin on the ground and the top of your right foot will be on the ground. Your right heel will be resting on the outside of your right hip. And again, staying upright is perfectly appropriate place to be because you might experience quite a bit of a stretch across the top of your right foot and the top of your right thigh. If you feel any pressure or pulling on the knee, like it's painful and pulling, sorry, there was a fuzzy flying, you might bring a blanket underneath that right knee for some support. And then you might stay upright. You might even begin to bend the elbows, walk the arms back, coming into more of like a reclined, pseudo half reclined shape. Maybe you come down to forearms. This side is a lot tighter for me, so I'm not sure I'm going to go all the way down, but you might allow yourself to go all the way down to the ground. Oh, okay, not too bad. But notice that going all the way down to the ground will really create an arch in the spine, bringing you into a back bend and really increases the stretch across the top of the right thigh. It's trash day tomorrow, so you might hear some noises outside, people bringing out their barrels. But if you find yourself distracted, just come back to your breath. Come back to the sensation you may be feeling in your body. Maybe the temperature of the air as it hits your skin. Breathe deeply into your belly, soften your jaw, allow your toes to be soft, relax your muscles in your legs. Notice the difference in your mind when you relax your body versus when you're clenching. You recall from the first side that we are not in this shape forever, so know it is temporary. And can you breathe into those spaces where you experience discomfort? One more long, deep breath in. Exhale fully. this in carefully. Big breath in, walk yourself upright. Very gently roll to your left side. Extend your right leg long to meet your left. Maybe massage out the knee for a moment. And then I invite you to do just a quick body scan and notice if there's anything that has changed or shifted in your body since you started this practice to now. Maybe massage out the legs again, giving your legs a little bit of love. And then bringing your blanket to about halfway down your mat, and you'll want to have it in more of like a bigger rectangle shape or square shape. You'll come into downward facing dog. So fingers will be spread wide, about shoulders width apart. You'll pike your hips up and back so that your spine is really long and your tailbone reaches back up and back towards the ceiling. Keep a slight bend in your knees. Maybe pedal out the feet here for a moment. Reach your right leg long and back. Left leg, sorry. Left leg long and back. And then bring your left knee to behind your left wrist, left ankle behind your right wrist, and then begin to shimmy your leg, that right leg back. You might look back and make sure that the leg is coming out directly from the hip straight behind you. So coming into Pigeon Pose. This is actually known as swan or sleeping swan when we fold forward in yin yoga. You might stay upright here. And your shin, your front shin does not have to be parallel with the top of your mat. You could also begin to fold forward. I'm actually going to switch sides so folks can see a little better. Sorry about that. So you may fold forward here, maybe coming onto forearms, maybe resting fully on your mat so that your torso really melts over that left leg. If you are melting forward, check on the hips for a moment. So you might find that one hip is maybe lifted more off the ground. You're leaning more to one side. Bring your hand to the back of your low back where that flat part is, the sacrum, and make sure that your hips are level. You might also actually bring one of your books or your blocks underneath your head so that you have some support if you are staying more upright. And you can see here that I have my left heel pretty close to my right hip. And so again, that left knee, left shin does not need to be parallel with the top of the mat. If you do decide to stay more upright, this is more actually a more fuller expression of the pose. As you're in a pretty deep back bend, there's some compression in the low spine, maybe an opening across the hips. So find what works for you here. But if you are in that upright position, really pushing your hands into the ground alongside you. Take some more deep, full breaths here. Again, breathing into the belly. Notice how breathing into the belly might even massage the low spine. Take another long, full breath in. Exhale, gently begin to press through the top or put your toes back on the ground on your, right leg. Walk yourself back up into that downward facing dog again. Maybe pedal through the feet. Maybe kind of shimmy the hips from side to side, twisting a little bit. And then moving on to the other side. Oops. So I'm just spinning around so you can see. So extending Your right leg now long behind you, curling, bending the right knee in, bringing the right knee behind your right wrist, right ankle behind your left wrist, and then shimmy your left leg back and looking back to ensure that the leg is coming out directly from the hip. You might stay upright here. That is potentially a deeper expression of the pose, as you might have some more compression in the spine, and it's also pretty intense across the top of the right thigh. You may fold forward gently, or maybe even just walk the arms out a little bit. Maybe come down to forearms. Maybe bring a block underneath your head for support. Ensure that you're not kind of leaning to one side and that the hips are level. And I didn't say this, but if you find that maybe one of your hips is lifted off the ground or sagging a bit more forward, you can bring some support. So that might mean bringing a block underneath your hips so that they can be evenly aligned over the floor. You know from the first side that we aren't in this shape forever, so continue to breathe here. Relax your jaw, relax your forehead. Breathe into the low back, massage your spine. You breathe into the outer right hip where you might feel a stretch or some compression, maybe some pulling. Few more full, expansive breaths here. One more long breath in. Exhale, gently use your arms to prop yourself back upright. Shimmy or shimmy. Sit your hips off to your right side for a moment. Extend your legs long in front of you. Lift your hips for a moment to remove that blanket if it's underneath your hips. And then the moment you've all been waiting for, relax back onto your mat on your back. Maybe bring your ankles or your feet to the corners of your mat. Rest your arms alongside you. Lift your chin toward your chest for a moment. Tuck your chin in toward your heart. Lower the head back down just to ensure that the chin and forehead are level to protect and support your neck, that cervical spine. Take some deep, full breaths in and out, maybe sighing out the mouth. Allow your whole body to rest and be supported by the earth beneath you. Allow your hips to really fully relax and be heavy on your mat. Allow your limbs to really rest. All of your connective tissues just gently relaxing and melting towards the earth. Maybe your eyes are closed or you have a soft gaze. Allowing every point of your body to relax. Breathing deeply into your belly. Long, full breath in. Sigh it out the mouth. Slowly begin to move the ankles, the feet, your wrists, your hands. Be rolling out the joints just a little bit. Hug your knees in toward your chest. Give yourself a squeeze. Maybe curl up into a little ball. And gently, slowly work your way up to a seated position, maybe with eyes closed or with a soft gaze. Bring your left hand to rest over your heart, fingers spread wide. Right hand rests on top of your left, fingers spread wide. Apply a gentle pressure here so that there's a sensation of weight over your chest. Big, full breath in. Sigh it out. Second one, big breath in. And exhale. Last one, make it count. Big breath in. Exhale, let it go. Slowly release your hands to your legs. Gently blink open your eyes and return back to the space. Thank you so much for making the time to practice today. Thank you for taking care of yourself in this practice. You might be a little bit sore over the next couple of days because we really worked into the hips, but hopefully you might notice a sense of relief and maybe a little bit of a hip opening over the next day or so. Take good care of yourselves. Make some tea after this. Make a nourishing meal. I hope that you get a really good night's rest, and we'll see you next week live. Have a good day.